within GCC, I found a very, very small number of people who are willing to try this.
Mm-hmm.
And then David and Dino, I found they were willing to try it for a while. So I have to understand why it is that it didn't stick. And it's not entirely my fault because all three of us came up with it together. So it's all three of our faults. So there's something missing yet about the adoption of this one-pager. So I'm looking for people to experiment with it and try and get that missing meme that can hopefully get this thing to be more sticky.
Well, Sophie, who was here last week, Sophie Varlow, so she runs a Commons platform, and she actually, the first time I met her at Open Co-op in London, she was talking to me about organizing like mycelium, and she actually wanted to take that as a website, but no one really knew what that was. And so she's definitely on your wavelength with that. And me too, I was interested in seeing if we could connect small groups already kind of formed or who want to form, kind of working together, but connecting, just like you're saying, through the roots instead of through some hierarchy, sharing intelligence. And it just as a uniting document, it's just, it's really important to have that. So I think that there needs to be something else. And what it is, I don't know, but that's another fascinating discussion. Like what you need to, and I think maybe like a vision. And I think that the vision needs to be an impossible to achieve vision. Not impossible, but like epic. Epic so that it kind of goes beyond politics. Because once you're like, if your vision is like, oh, we want the Democrats to win, like that kind of sucks as a vision because that already limits you right there.
Besides, they already have that vision.
Like it needs to be a fun vision, like something that would be amazing and that's achievable, but not easy and not clear cut how you would do it.
I got an idea.
Huh.
I've been thinking about this for a little while, and I actually texted it to somebody this morning. The Knowledge Olympics. And if you have knowledge trails, they should lead to the Knowledge Olympics, I think. So that's a whole big promotional thing, and it's epic, all right? And you could start it small, but it could actually become a real thing. But I'm thinking just one small example that is kind of out of the box. When it comes to your health,
mm-hmm.
Different cultures have very deep ingrained things about your health and what you should do to keep healthy. And so I think there's a lot of knowledge there that falls outside of the mainstream, that, certain kinds of teas with ginger in them, or, just different cultures. So that's a simple example. Other examples would be the fact that nuclear power is still the cleanest, safest, most hopeful way to provide energy to the planet. And Heiner raised something about liquid hydrogen or something. So I don't know, but there's definitely, you could have some really interesting things. I think the Knowledge Olympics would be what do you think of that idea?
I don't know. Tell me more about it. How would that, I don't understand how that would work.
Well, that's the fun of it. It could be whatever we want it to be. But the point is that it's Olympics. So it's epic, and it's global, and it's the pinnacle. And people who were in the COI would have a team there, and they'd have a flag.
So two thoughts on that one from me, if that's okay. One is, and this is be a little bit pokey, I think it's not yet grand enough in the sense of grand impact I'm hearing from Lauren. Second, I do think that when it comes to these kinds of practices and these kinds of initiatives, I very much see and dislike other efforts of let's compete to see who's best at XYZ. Okay, that's inherently non-collaborative. So when I was thinking about what can we do,
Except for when it's knowledge, because then you have science, right? So you got to keep it that cleanliness. You're right. You got to keep the undercutting out of it. It's the COI that's, you know, that you want to put forward.
yeah. So the component of the challenge that I think I hear from you and from Lauren, which I very much would like to inject here, is the challenge is how disparate and how different could you actually connect with others, and how quickly can you scale effectively in a particular direction or problem or team or mission or output or product. In other words, rather than saying, hey, team A did better because they did 89 points and team B did, 74, why don't we challenge team A and team B to see if they can connect on sufficient points so that they actually create team AB and create something better than team A or team B created independently.
Yeah, and that's very much
demonstrating collective intelligence.
Yeah, that's very close to my idea also of having these remote hackathons. So it doesn't have to be the smartest people competing. It could be the smartest 14-year-olds. And smartest is not the right word. I think the most engaged is the right word.
So I would look at it in terms of not just connection or numbers of people, but how many actual reals of knowledge product or reasoning product or executable knowledge can they connect together? In other words, can they take one idea from team A, can they take another idea, find useful ways that those ideas complement and build on each other? And then can they find multiple such connections? And then can they create a knowledge structure or a team structure or a, let's say, governance structure that is greater slash better slash whatever metrics you want to apply than either one could have come up with on their own? Because to me, collective intelligence is how you demonstrate that together we're better. I mean, we hear this all the time, and it's
Right.
motherhood and apple pie, but we've never proven it. Because the minute we mention it, somebody says, oh, it's better, obviously, because X, Y, Z. So the point is we never actually agree on what is getting better, because it's always multidimensional.
Yeah.
Is it speed to solution? Is it quality of solution? Is it the number of bugs? Is it the result itself? Is it the user experience? Is it the impact on the planet? Is it ecological impact? Is it number of dollars you can make from it? Is it how good I feel at the end of the day? What are the metrics?
Well, it's this.
And without talking about them, people can always say, oh, this is better because, but we never get explicit about those metrics. And then that's arguing.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I think each realm has its own metrics. And some people even measure with just, Chris Cook was talking about this, that if you can measure it, you can build a strategy around it a lot easier. So if what you're trying to achieve is hard to measure, then it's really hard to build a strategy around. And I think the strategy here is, in my mind, the spirit of working together. And I think it can be slow moving because of the boundaries of competition and capitalism and investment that needs to be protected, and risks and la 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 la. So that slows everything down when you have to add quality in. When you work in a group like this, we can foster some ideas, but I think as soon as a big funding, say if somebody funded us all of a sudden with $10 million, then things would change really quickly. So are we ready for that, to fairly split that up? Or can we raise that money? Do we know how much we need, or resources? So when you come into a knowledge Olympics, it would be many, many different people solving many problems. And I like the idea right now, because of working with an infinite canvas, you have to narrow it down. So I'm thinking about picking one thing is like values. So like values would be one big topic. Like, how do you find better values? And that's into philosophy and stuff. And then another one would just be like, some of the most challenging issues that we have of today. Like they used to do with mathematics, who can solve this proof? Who can make a proof to solve this axiom or whatever? So I don't know if those are the right words, but you know what I mean.
Theory.
So
Theory.
yeah, and so I think we have that challenge, and we have to work together to that challenge. But again, it seems like the realism is that it's always value driven, and who has time to and attention to really invest in these kinds of ideas unless they have some kind of a business plan or way to survive through the journey. That's interesting. Go ahead.
So I'm afraid that lack of sleep has made me a little bit pokey, because I'm going to slightly disagree. I mean, values always sound foundational. Values sound like they're the basis of every decision. But to try and align on values that we've seen on GCC takes forever. It always takes forever. So in order to kick off collaboration and really enable it, I think we have to take a more middle out strategy rather than bottom up or first principles or axiomatic. So in other words, you have to do everything at once. That's the whole agile model. You have to do everything at once, okay? And do the best you can and understand the sprint cycle in which you're doing it, so that at the end of the sprint, you can learn and say, what could have gone better, and design the next sprint accordingly. So we can say, I believe in coexistence, you believe in love, somebody else believes in efficiency, somebody else believes in profit. And we can say, okay, fine, let's see if that can coexist. Let's try something for a week or 2 weeks or a month or a year or whatever we decide, okay? And then at the end of that period, let's say, okay, so what worked? What didn't work? You know, the 4 agile questions, what kept working and we should keep doing, okay? What do we need to do differently or new? Third, what do we need to stop doing? Hi, Amanda. And fourth, what do we not yet understand? Those are the typical retrospective questions. And if we ask those repeatedly, we will learn.
I do agree that people who have a one hammer swing solution are really working on hard problems, and values typically be the thing that one can use as a magic carpet to ride through things. And I agree that values are looking out to the edges from the middle, like you're saying. But I think the edges and the boundaries have to be named if they're to be appreciated and possibly muted somewhat. Like, if we can all say we want better, well, as long as you're not an nihilist, we're getting closer. Right? I don't know if I could work with an nihilist. So I think it's more on that terms to try to let people know. And I think even more on the cultural side of things, where a hand signal can mean something in one culture and mean something else in another. I think it's more towards the adapter I'm looking for, as opposed to righteousness. And where righteousness comes out, it needs to be handled very carefully.
May I propose a potential solution for this? Because
Yes.
there is something, welcome Amanda. We're trying to crack the code of collaboration. So there's one keyword that we can focus on maximizing, that I would believe naturally everything else would be sorted out naturally. And yeah, it may sound a bit ridiculous, but if you maximize on having fun, right?
I like that. I like that direction.
Because if
the Olympics are supposed to kind of be that entertainment component.
Now, I'll tell you what I mean. I'll tell you what I mean. So when I do hackathons, I do sprints, I do startups, long-term, short-term, distributed, co-located, all sort of things. What I've found, the best results in terms of alignment, values, coherency, everything's always have had a correlation with the ability of the team having fun with each other, basically. So yeah, this is just something that just became clear for me now when I was listening to your conversation.
Well, it is interesting how we are doing it as we're talking about doing it. How do we capture it, focus on it, and fund it? I think how you make it successful.
Because the thing is, those who are in the startup world, those who are able to build a team are those who can provide a fun environment to work. Because even if you are working a product that's going to solve the world's problem and everything is in place, if people are not really enjoying it, especially talents, they're not going to stick around. So this is something that's important. It's kind of maybe this is our way of our species, our way of us aligning ourselves with each other.
Yeah, I also heard as well along those lines from psychology experiments about what motivates employees. Is it more money or what is it? And you might have seen the RSA graph. What do? They do the little illustration, the stories on the, while they're telling a talk, somebody's illustrating it. I just love those. It was about the fact that if you give somebody you're working with, or if everybody has enough money so they don't have to worry about money, like their food's taken care of, their drive home's taken care of, that, you know, they lose their next paycheck, they're not done. I think that's the universal income kind of an idea as well, if you think about it. I think that's security and really reducing the stress in one's life. I think a certain amount of stress to keep you on the ball is important, but to be worrying about where, you know, not having enough money and providing for your family, I think it decreases your IQ by 13 points right off the bat, I think it was said.
So now, like, reflecting back on what Sam was saying, firstly, I totally agree. You can't start with values if you want to bring a group of people, because that gets too complicated very quickly. But then maybe if we pick, as we do iterations, if you pick one element, if that's about how much fun we have. And also there's something in engineering, you come up with initial values. And if you pick initial values relatively good, intuitively good, then eventually you converge to a set of acceptable answers. So if you bring about a group of people who are likely to work it out and try to maximize on the fun you're going to have and the satisfaction individually as you iterate in every sprint, as a result, the values are going to be aligned and the people would find everything else. Yeah.
Well, except to me, fun also sounds like a value.
Yeah,
you know?
I was going to say.
So if we're assuming that fun is going to be a unifying factor, that's like taking away the conversation and just assuming one of the solutions already, which is okay if the entire group agrees and decides to live with it for the duration of a particular sprint. But I just wanted to reflect that is, to me, value as well. Over.
Yeah, it is an assumption. You're right. That was an assumption. Yeah, you're right.
There's probably one word.
Can I?
Amanda has been having her hand up as well.
Maybe Amanda has the word. What's the word, Amanda?
Well, I was just interested because today I was reading about trauma and dissociation and about holding this space or for someone to get the fragmented pieces together. And we end up in trauma, what was it? When we cannot get the pieces of ourselves together, we end up in long, prolonged trauma somehow, which is kind of interesting, still having in mind that the reason why we meet is not always to have fun at all. And also the reason why we work and why we have to earn money has to do with it, I think. The fact that we have a stress factor, that is driving us somewhere. Otherwise, this is going to really get boring. Sam, please go.
Yeah. And why don't we recognize that while we're each at different phases of our life, at each phase, it's a different issue that's going to totally focus your time and attention, right? When I'm 16 and 17, it's like, does that girl over there like me? Did she even look at me, right? When I'm 40, it's like, where's the meaning in my life, When I'm 60, it's like, where are my grandkids, When I'm 30, it's like, where's the money at, So if we recognize that everybody's got different concerns at different stages of life, and those can be viewed as values, then how does it make sense that we unify, right? To me, that doesn't even make sense to recognize that humans go through different phases. So to me, I seem to be harping on this. The point is for all of these things in each of us that are alive to coexist, to recognize that it's okay, and to still be effectively coming together while we have these differences of focus and time and attention and money and energy and quality, all these sort of things. So to me, none of that actually makes sense unless you have a unifying theme or mission or objective or project or achievement or metric. If we don't have that, then just as in GCC, we're talking forever. But if we have that, we can say, okay, for 2 weeks, whatever it is, you know, let's agree, let's move on, let's see how we do. At the end of that 2 weeks, let's jigger a little bit, okay? Not everything, let's jigger a little bit, and then do it again. At the end of that 2 weeks, let's jigger it again, let's do it again, okay? That's the sprint, that's the learning cycle. And if we don't have that, if we don't have anything we're actually trying to do, then that 2 weeks doesn't make any difference, doesn't have any context, and then that 2 weeks turns into forever.
Guys, like, do all of you know about double diamond concept?
Yes, divergence and convergence.
Yes. And
I don't.
Yeah, it's a very beautiful concept. I'm putting the link. I'll just put a link in. Okay, this one's good. On Facebook. Okay. It spams everyone else too. So basically, it's like that divergence. When you just explore the whole thing, then you stop at one point and you converge.
Yeah.
Or maybe Sam, you explain.
No, go ahead.
Yeah.
I'm not an expert at explaining this.
Okay, so let's say
I'll have my shot.
Yeah, let's say we want to build a product. I'm an electrical engineer. Let's say we call in, and we have some other people. We just start talking. We just randomly talking. Everyone brings something. I read something in the news. I did this. I did that. 10 years ago, I did this. That's why we diverge, and we explore all different things that we have in our minds, or put it all on the table. And at one point, we have to stop. And that's what Sam says. There has to be a point where you stop. And then in the other sprint, we say, now let's converge. Now let's see, okay, we've seen all these things. Let's pick some of them, right? That's when you converge and land on a common point. That's the design phase. In the implementation, again, you diverge. You start building randomly, right? But at one point, you have to stop and see, okay, what kind of things you've built. And then it's the fourth phase, when you converge again and you strip the code and make the final product. So the reason I brought this up when Sam said that was that it's good to recognize at any point that we are in a convergence or divergence phase to allow ourselves to be random, or to know that we can't be random anymore. We've been random already in the previous sprint. Now this is time to not bring up anything new, just look at what we've had and strip it out to land on a particular result. That would make it very, very productive environment. I would like to be in that environment where everyone understands which phase we're at. Am I brainstorming, or am I just shutting up, letting other people assess the risk of what we've come up with?
So may I augment that slightly before people respond?
Sorry. Oh, yeah, I want to know whether we're doing startup world or doing something else, because I'm from the peer-to-peer world and I'm post-startup. So before we start to talk about productivity and so on, I'm like, wait a minute, that's not my realm.
Well, I think it doesn't have to be an either. To me, it's not a binary. Okay, so it fits.
For me, it is maybe. So I want to just put it in.
Right.
That if we do not meet our differences in values, we start actually wavering around who we are.
So may I
want to know who are we? Actually.
May I comment on Alex's description of the double diamond?
Right.
Okay. So the point of this, to me, there's a key meme in here, which is anything that exists must exist twice. And I forget exactly who said that, but it's Gilbert Ryle at minimum. Okay, he's a philosopher, but other people have said this as well. So in other words, before something exists that we create physically or in software, okay, it must exist in our minds first. That's the notion, okay? So in other words, we have to conceive or define or specify what it is we want to create, and then we go to create it. Unless you're doing art, in which case this is just a whole big spiral every single day, every moment, okay? But usually when you're in, let's say, engineering, construction, mathematics, whatever it is, so you're trying to figure something out, and then you do it. even in recipes, or dressmaking or whatever. So the whole point is, when you're coming up with something, you have to consider possibilities, and that's the divergence phase. You want to go and look at what exists so that you maybe don't have to redo it if it already exists, or you look at what components might come together that you want to actually create as something new, okay? And at the time that you feel that you've canvassed the universe sufficiently, then you want to say, or you just don't have enough time. You're halfway through your sprint or whatever, okay? At some point, something drives you to say, I got to make a decision. So that's the convergence phase. So you actually say, okay, out of all these possibilities, this is what we want to do. And that's the conversation around convergence, okay? So now it exists in your mind. And now you want to make it real in the world. So then you go in and look at, okay, so what are the tools, the materials, the whatever else that is the best practices that we can bring together? And that's another form of divergence and consideration. And then at some point you have to pick something and say, okay, we're going to use React, we're going to use HTML, we're going to use HTTPS, we're going to use SSL, blah, blah, blah. And that's how we're going to converge on something. So in that time-driven, sprint-driven mode, you have to do this twice. You have to create here, and then you have to create there. And that's the double diamond. Diverge, converge, diverge, converge. Do it here first, do it here second. So that's the way I understand double diamond, okay?
That was really good, yeah.
Yeah, over. So that's why, Amanda, in response to you, it's not whether or not it's driven by profit, driven by projects, driven by teams, whatever. To me, it's almost any endeavor that we can actually create.
So, I'm not interested in general practices in general. It's like I can read a book, and that's fine. So I'm just, interested.
What was the point to that comment then, Amanda?
If we are working together or we're doing something together, I miss really the basis on which we're exchanging at the moment. I was also later, so that can be, the thing. But just for general convergence, divergence, and so on, and general startup and blah blah blah. For me, it does matter in which group I'm present. At this moment, I'm just wondering, like, we talk about values, but we talk around it. For me, I'm just feeling like, so where are we going? What are those values? What are we sharing? So what are we going to do with it? Instead of just having a general value like fun, it's not enough for me. So I have been around the field like for 7 years. I'm in a very specific corner. I'm dealing with ethics. So if it's not going anywhere, I'm just like, if you're just going to do general convergence and divergence, that's fine. But general model, look up.
I can answer that. Answer that. There are two ways of looking at it. One is that Amanda is trying to find out what works for her. The other way is that Alexa is trying to find out what works for teams, right? So these are three different questions.
It's not only for me personally or for teams. Yes. It's just, this is a team. You're now a team for these 2 hours. And where is it going?
I think that's a presumption.
Well, maybe it's a presumption, but I'm just like, I'm looking at it. I'm like, what is my relation to this? And I'm like, I don't see it at the moment because.
But do you want to co-create it, Amanda, or do you want to criticize what's happening?
No, I want to know whether I have a role here or not, because if I cannot cohere, this is the thing. So maybe I shouldn't be here. So this is also interesting. I'm wondering at the moment whether I should be here, because it looks like a general discussion about convergence, divergence. I don't see my relation as a peer-to-peer at the moment. I don't see ethical values coming in. I don't see, so I saw it with Colin's discussion. I don't know where it's going.
So
really.
Why don't you lead us into that conversation or ask, generously, but it's across right now is criticism, Amanda.
No, I want to know whether we are going to share values or not. And if it's not, then maybe I'm not interested to share the general things before we share the values.
Yeah, that's good. Colin, what was your point?
For me, that's essential.
No. What I think is what's going on is we're definitely in this triangle right now. We've come into the room and we are throwing out some options. Now, I started with the Knowledge Olympics, and it went on to the fact that, perhaps that is not this kind of collaborology that Sam was talking about because of competition. And then I said, I want to change the word definition of the interest factor to be more about the fun and collaborating to join to solve some of the world's greatest problems. At least let some 14-year-olds try and give them all the tools that they need to think about it, and hackathons or whatever they need. You want to try to solve this problem? What do you got? I think Bolivier's right that people under 25 and over 50 are the ones with the time to really put into this for a target market. So, you know, there are some things we can discuss, but the idea is the Knowledge Olympics. So it's a huge vision of how do you build knowledge trails together to get there. So everybody's bringing their angle here. So there's no real criticism necessary other than just asking questions of what's this or that. So I'm writing down a map of what we're talking about as far as collaboration, the COIs, and Sam's specific trail there. You mentioned, Amanda, if it's a binary, whether it's a startup or a peer-to-peer. So there's a conversation. We have models to discuss, which was one of my favorite parts. Alexis brought up the double diamond, and we're kind of commenting on how that applies. And then also mentioned there was flavors of ways to do this, as in, are we building something new? And as we're doing it, we have to realize, as in this conversation, our options need to converge at some point. So we're throwing options out there of what to talk about. And another important point is whether you're dealing with an artistic or an engineering project, because engineering is less spontaneous than art as it moves forward. It has to have some serious groundings before people get together, and you know, we don't start at building microprocessor level. We go pick the right microprocessors. So I think I'm in the middle on my journey and quest this last year, coming with my artist foot first, but using my engineering knowledge to guide you know, what seems logical or reasonable and what doesn't, at the same time being open to all kinds of things I normally wouldn't be, because I know I can't do it alone, and I know my opinions are only so good when it comes to things, and that's why I'm looking more to soften these criticisms into actual poignant classifiers and clarifiers and focus and context manipulators. So if Amanda comes in and grabs a hold of the control station for a second and moves a few knobs, it should get clearer, and there should be an easier way to do that. And then we could say, no, reset back to what we were talking about. And so it's almost like GitHub, where somebody comes in with a solution and adds it to the project, and people have to decide whether to pull that solution in or not, as opposed to considering, and that again is the reason why from the middle I would consider values, because I think Amanda came right in at the values part, and Sam also mentioned that the values kind of trigger him, because it never really gets us that far if we start from values. We have to appreciate values. So I'm saying you start from the middle and try to appreciate things, and and steel man people instead of straw man them. It takes more time, but if you actually find out, you know, what is it you're doing and how does it work, and are you sure that's the best way? That was the thing that William and I were doing. You come with the proposal, but then we say, well, is that the best proposal? Like, what is it you're trying to get? So you ask a few why questions, why 2 or 3 times, and you might find out that you could short circuit that right away, because Clifford just came into the room and he knows a whole bunch of stuff that I didn't know about what's just around the corner. So, you know, that's the collaboration and the open mind to find. And I think that we can use the network to query out the best solutions. And if people believe that they can do that, maybe we're onto the Knowledge Olympics. I don't know. But I think it comes down to bringing the hackathons to the rural places, not making everybody get on a plane to go someplace in Europe for some South by Southwest. I think that's backwards these days. Anyway, that's just my opinion.
Really good. Okay, Sam, go ahead, and then I'll add it.
Sorry, just something really quick, okay? So in other words, you eliminate, in my opinion, the double diamond effect, the double divergence, convergence, only if you've got somebody with already a vision, a set of resources, and a management model, the old model that says, okay, I'm going to hire you to do X, Y, Z. So I've got the concept already in my mind. The first diamond's already been done. So we want to get into that second diamond. I want you to do X. I want you to do Y. That allows you to eliminate that. But it still had to be created somewhere, okay? So the question is, do we want to co-create that first diamond? Or do we want to just sign up and say, okay, Lauren, tell me what to do, I will do it because I trust you, or you're paying me or something like that, which is, again, a very old model. So if we're converging, then I think, Amanda, you're asking for that convergence before we've actually diverged and examined these possibilities. So that's what I'm seeing.
I don't know whether I do, just to say, I live and move from values. And I do not go into meta models, you know, of how
Right.
things go in general.
At the risk of ping-ponging, we all do.
Diverge into the values first. But what I feel is like, I'm feeling not like a secular discussion today, actually. I feel like deep diving, and I feel I'm in the wrong place at the moment. I don't know. I want to listen to Payton a little and then see if I dive out and just eat and do something else, because I want to be in deep stuff and not in convergence discussions. Sorry.
Let's see what Fallon said. And then I have a question for Amanda. Okay. So let's Fallon, what do you have to say? Fallon, did you have something to say?
Yes. Thank you. Now, I've obviously come into the conversation a bit late, and sorry about that. I was having like a really deep conversation with my wife that took a bit. But
no, we don't shun late people here, Fallon.
But I came in, and it seemed rather apropos that I came in while Amanda was talking, and she was talking about values. And I don't think that we can actually talk about, I mean, convergence and values, those are synonymous. You know, you can't converge without understanding the values that that's actually driving that convergence. And I don't know if this is something that you guys had spoken about before I actually got on, and I don't think that it's a circular conversation. I think that if we don't understand what's governing our intent, we won't go anywhere. I think that that's an important conversation to have.
That is a topic actually we've been talking about so far. So Amanda, I have a question for you. What kind of, if you were to choose without you enforcing it, of the conversations that we're going to have today, what kind of things you would have liked that to be? What kind of topic?
I don't know. I was in quite deep topics today. So I was dealing about trauma. I was dealing about Kabbalah. I was dealing about religion. I was dealing about New Zealand. And then, you know, to have a secular, not circular, but secular discussion about general divergence and convergence without, you know, touching the values. It was just like, I'm like, oh no, that's gonna, you know, my energy is gonna go somewhere else. It's just like, so it's okay, but I just feel a bit.
Well, I second the question, because that's what I was going to ask. What is it you would like to bring to the conversation, if there's anything, or you could just like try to get in the flow. I think the flow is a big thing that's coming. Coexistence is really important. Working in the flow with people, not having to stop and redo things. Being effective, having an effective routine, so that you know, it's easier to say than do. Just ask me. But I think finding the flow is important. So if you can tweak how you can join the flow, I think that's more important than saying unless you have to say why the flow isn't working for you. That happened with Heidi. She left a conversation after being quiet for the whole conversation. She does her exercises. She has her whole routine, which I understand, but people in the room didn't understand. And she's a very kind lady who likes to speak from her heart, and she's a little sharp sometimes. But she ended by saying, well, in her German way, in English, this isn't for me and I don't want this. Like, I was thinking, like, the best way to do that would have been to say, well, my name is Heidi and this is what I like to do and this is what I'm looking for. So this was an interesting conversation, but it doesn't fit me today. And I think that's so much more important, that unless you actually have to steer the conversation another way and criticize where somebody's going to go off the cliff. And I think it is within a really good example. We're diverging right now in a conversation, and we're planning on converging. So maybe we should talk about that actual thing. Like, what are we diverging, converging on? Maybe.
Lauren, before you say that, Lauren, that was really good, Colin, because maybe this group for me can work like this. If I join the group and I can follow the flow of conversation, I would. if I see, because every one of us are coming from totally different environments, maybe doing different things. And like in your case, Amanda, you're in a different headspace. It's nothing to do with this abstract conversation. In those cases, so that may happen for me next week, for example. So we can recognize that we have the choice to understand that this is not the flow that I can swim at that speed, or it's not my thing now. Or maybe I can just listen. Or maybe I like to steer it differently, but the way we phrase it can also be different. Like, yeah, we're becoming more and more conscious about how we phrase things and how it impacts the flow of conversation. That's the takeaway for me from what Colin said. That was really interesting. Lauren, pass to you.
Can I offer something?
Go ahead.
Okay.
That's yours.
I've been thinking about you guys a lot this week. It's interesting. There were a couple of times where I'm like, oh my God, I want to have a conversation with this particular person or that particular person. And this week has been like a really tough week, whether it's thinking about New Zealand, diving into the script that I'm currently writing, which is an emotional process for me because in a lot of ways, I'm forced to have these conversations with you guys in my own head to direct just that, my values, because I'm envisioning a world that embodies the values that I think would push humanity forward. And how does that work with technology? I know that Alexa, I've kind of given you some insight, and Lauren knows what I'm writing about. And I shared something with her this week. I was thinking like, okay, well, my script deals with artificial intelligence and how does what role does artificial intelligence, what role could it play in terms of helping humanity recontextualize their connection to each other and to the world that we live in, the physical world that we live in, the resources, the technologies. And this idea came in my head where I was like, okay, well, what it would look like if we, within the context of extended cognition, what would the world look like if we had like a Siri that had our own voices? Hello?
So is this a new conversation you're bringing up?
Yeah. I'm like, it's
okay.
Yeah.
I was trying to find the connection.
Yeah. What would the world look like if we had Siri? If Siri had our own voices and was connected to the cloud and can basically contextualize things for us? I mean, it lends to the conversation that Alexa and Josh and I were having, like in terms of those of us who are unable to understand the context or to connect to a particular context. Like how could artificial intelligence bridge that particular gap? And I had like this really scary thought, like, okay, well, what would it look like if our voices were actually lost and the technologies themselves were the ones dictating our agency, without us understanding that, I mean, go ahead.
I wanted to say that this is part of the knowledge banking thing. Well, it's part of the software that is, going in my head. So it's kind of interesting. So I'm very interested that you're doing that.
Yeah.
And there's a big danger also in of course, in technology taking our voice in that sense, which is real, I would say.
Yeah, exactly. And just like the moral dilemma that presents, like, okay, well, here is this voice. Think about Siri. Siri only engages us once we engage it. But more and more technology, especially with such programs as, like, let's say a Calendarly, that tells us like, okay, well, this is the time that we actually have allotted to do certain things, imagine if Calendly was able to you have all of your stuff, all of the stuff you need to do, and then you get like this voice in your head that asks you like, well, do I really want to have this conversation with Josh today? And you have the option of saying no, or yeah, I forgot. Well, it's almost time to have this conversation.
Hold on, Colin. Yeah, before we get dragged into that, Colin.
Sorry, Colin.
Yeah, no, that's okay. I was enjoying the dream. You can continue on to the end of that if you have one.
Yeah. So just that. I was thinking like, okay, well, our voices, you know, the intent of our voices, the ethics, the spirit, the drive, whatever that power that's guiding our agency, you know, like what happens when there's the lines are blurred, where we cease to understand how much the systems that we are immersed in has power over those voices. Like, that's something that's really been weighing on my head. I mean, not even to say that it takes artificial intelligence to bring us to that point. It's just simply right now, the systems that we're currently living in that direct our agency, that give a hierarchy to our intents, a hierarchy in governance to the way that we deal with each other, that govern our hearts, you know, that prohibit us from fully realizing the potential of our hearts, the potential of our empathy, you know, because no, this is not how things are actually done. I can't really empathize with this person because this person doesn't necessarily subscribe to the same systems, the same values, the same understandings that I do, you know, those disconnects and not understanding how they permeate through every single thing that we do. So in terms of the value conversation that Amanda was talking about, I'm like, that has to precipitate everything for us to really, it can't really be the architecture first. It has to be the voice. It has to be the spirit. It has to be those values that are able to get extricated from these systems. Because if we're just going back and sorry, go ahead, Amanda.
No, and if you realize how much damage there is and how painful that is, then, you know, having just a secular conversation without the values about a model is just being painful at some point. Just adding, you know, so I was looking at this conversation, I was like, okay, and for me, they're not neutral also. So startups, not neutral. Convergence, divergence, double diamond, I don't know where it comes from, but when it's stripped from the values, it's not neutral, because then it has, you know, it's taking voices, other voices out, actually. So that was the realization, and I'm a bit heavy on this tone also today. So it's interesting. That's the
conversation I wanted to have with you.
I love that. Yeah, I love that. But okay, yeah.
No, I sense that that's where you were coming from, and your voice was something really heavy in my head when I was actually thinking about that. And I said, you know what? Let me take the voice outside of my head and actually talk.
Wonderful.
Fallon, is it Fallon or Phelan? Sorry, it's David here from London. I'm not sure if you're checking the chat, but there was a lovely series, sort of podcast theatre thing from about 2 years ago called Life After, on this company, this AI company that created this software called VoiceTree, which was all about, it's really spooky and really quite deep. It's about 12-part series, can't remember. I just put the link in the chat as well for you if you haven't heard it. And what that play was about was the company data mined all your social media accounts, learned the way you wrote, copied your videos and then created a kind of artificial voice persona for you, that the business model was based around if one of your loved ones passed away, died, you could resurrect him or her and continue a conversation with her. So it's called Life After. And it's really kind of spooky, cultish, weird play. So if you're writing a script on that, I'd certainly check that out.
Yeah, definitely. And beyond the script, because I was telling Lauren, I was like in my own head thinking about the script. I'm like, wait a minute. Imagine if Calendly or these programs, you know, an amalgam of these programs, but with your own personal voice, you know, like.
Yeah, they're doing that. It's just coming. So if you check out what's happening with the voice technology stuff, that's already being worked on. It's not science fiction. It's just within a couple of years, we'll have that. So.
Yeah, I can imagine.
The question is why we have that. Because, you know, if you look like laws of manifestation, it might be dangerous to have something else use your voice, because your voice is a thing in the moment. It is connected to your energy. It has a direct, you know, effect in your surrounding. And if you cannot just copy that with a voice machine, and if it works, you know, then how does it work? And it does not work on that level. What does it mean? We don't even know what it means. And this is the thing that fascinates me, actually. I don't care about those systems, but I care that we are messing around with it. And we are not even aware of what we're making. We're like children, you know, in the manifestation field.
Yes,
That's a danger.
I don't know what the context that people are coming from in here, but certainly for me, like probably like 20 years of thinking plus in this area is just the lack of self-conscious direction of technology or where it's going or politics or so looking at what governance systems you can put to lead the direction of the creation of algorithms and so forth, how you do it. So it's just very pragmatic. So we know this stuff is coming. We know we're not consciously directing it. We know that it's subject to market forces and sort of like the invisible hand and what have you. And, you know, the aim really is how do you make the invisible hand visible?
Yeah.
And the invisible hand was Adam Smith's invention, a political invention in order to give him a domain in which he could experiment with the new science of economics without interfering with the king and politics. So he wanted to make economics apolitical so that him and his mates could experiment with it without being arrested. But it was, so when you abstract it enough, it's invisible. But if you want to do something political and you abstract it into a set of algorithms or whatever it is, it looks to us or the man on the street or your children or philosophers or writers as just intangible, apolitical science. But that's only because you've just abstracted it a long way. And that makes it very easy to manipulate things at scale, or be manipulated not even by individuals, but just by the emergence of the rules of the game. So making it visible and then having conscious control over the direction of things is, to me, why I turned up here. So I don't know why I'm here. I don't know who's here, but hello.
Hello.
Hello, yeah, welcome. That was brilliant. Yeah. Colin, go ahead. And
welcome, David, by the way. I'm so glad you're here.
Yeah, me too. Me too.
I'm also glad I never saw you in real life, David. I saw you lots on Facebook. I followed your posts and so on.
Is that right? Yeah, it is very serendipitous world we are in. And it's nice to see you, David. And I like the fact that you used context in your first sentence. That's my favorite word, because it is all context. And Amanda came into the conversation in a context that felt uncomfortable to her. And it came across as criticism when really it was just alignment, I think. But at the same time, we're working with a blank slate here. So people are going to bring out their natural risk mechanisms and their natural selves, which is very interesting. So, and the longer you make me wait till talk, the more I have to say, which is a consequence as well, because I'm taking notes. Phelan, you're not Chris. I knew that. Just your thing said Chris when you came up.
No, I don't know why it keeps on resetting to Claire when I keep on
Claire, yeah. Claire. So anyway, the knowledge trails is where my context is, and it's just a general idea of having a way to keep track of where you've been, what you know, a custom how-to for the person that comes after you. And Phelan is saying, well, what if we could project that out and be an agent for us or of us? And, I think David mentioned that that's already being done on our behalf by scraping us and trying to nudge us, because it's a lot easier to predict what we're going to do, not if you just watch us, but also nudge us in certain directions. Then the algorithms get even easier to predict, you see. So we're being manipulated. It comes down to, I think, what Amanda was getting into is that eventually I think that agent has to be generated from us, not from somebody scraping us.
Yes.
And so we have to be able to
Colin,
put that agent into the world.
Yeah, I want to exactly point at that, because Amanda, for the exact reason that you care about going to the values and are not interested in secular systems, for the same reason, that's very important to be able to have those secular conversations, because then we can find out what's the best design for a system that brings the power to the hand of peers or individuals, not those who can actually nudge us on a larger scale. So it's extremely important to be able to have those conversations without being affected by emotions and value systems or anything totally abstract. Otherwise, like what David was saying, we wouldn't be able to recognize, identify those invisible systems and be able to redesign our systems in a way that would empower us. Also, if we want to choose, we shouldn't also this is what I do. I always try to go abstract because I don't want to be the one who chooses what is the right value system. So the way I design... Go ahead.
I just want to say what he just said about not wanting to be the one that chooses. That is a very hard and painful position to try to hold, because I know what that's like.
I was going to say the same thing. I mean, it looks abstract, but even an abstract, discussion has a certain value underneath. So if you say we have to see how peers are going to govern, that's typical. That's already a decision. So what I miss is, I don't know. So I do get that if everything gets blurred with emotions, that's another thing. But emotions and values are two things. So,
can I suggest there? So a lot of the structured and facilitated debates and political processes or decision-making processes that have mucked around within an art context or a legal context or a software development context, you do have this debate between types of people. One type of person, often in like open source, technical, and even political, is very kind of philosophical and abstract. And they're intensely passionate about removing emotion from the argument. They want often, for instance, to remove things like face-to-face. They want the argument to be done rationally. They want it to be done in text. I mean, I got involved, I started this thing called Liquid Democracy a long time ago, and a lot of the people who got really into that kind of insisted that that political debate was done in text, that it was done in the open, that everyone's identity, and that kind of desire for this kind of abstract, emotion-free, and rational analysis of argument also comes from people who hate, and it comes from their nature, and it comes from people who hate the sort of overly knee-jerk emotional reaction of current politics, and they want to get back to a more scientific or rational debate. On the other side, are the people who absolutely distrust making these pretend judgments that are trying to abstract all emotion or values out of the debate. And these people want to bring in like art and empathy and honesty about the emotional place that you're coming from. And they want, if there's a challenge or a tension or a conflict, to bring that emotion out and then analyze things from that emotional point of view. And they insist on that being absolutely essential to the political or the value-making decision. And unfortunately, you very rarely get a dialogue where both perspectives are integrated and valid, because these characters are so different. You know, your coder, political, abstract, often, if I'm allowed to be sexist, which I love to do whenever I can get the chance, male kind of professorial types, and your more creative, artistic types don't tend to agree on a common methodology. And I'm hoping certainly that we can combine both in whatever we're here for.
I would definitely say that's the platform I'm trying to, or the tightrope I'm trying to walk on. And my angle on that is models and filters and what Phelan was talking about. It's definitely about having the ability to, which I didn't get to mention last time, I mentioned the agent part of putting yourself out there, which is an agent that is of you, not of somebody else scraping you and putting out, you know, advertisement bots to all the corporations, and that's what you see on your browser. But what you want to put out, like what I would like right now, everybody in the room, I want to put out my three questions, and my bot already knows I want that. So you already have an email in your inboxes, every one of you, right? So if I had my system, so it's not there. But the other thing, besides having an agent, is having something that's smarter than you, that knows what you like and can bridge that gap. Like, for example, if I don't know how to speak a certain language, or I don't know that culture, or I don't appreciate their values because I don't know what they are, like, how can what I have to say be, you know, AI manipulated without having a horrific translation mistake like Chinglish or something like this to actually hit that mark? So that gets on to what I think Phelan was getting to the end of his dream about, or how do we make the invisible hand? So no, it was the invisible hand. That was David. How do we make the invisible hand visible? Also, the algorithms are directing us. How do we take control of those algorithms? And do we, you know, and what are the different flavors of value? We're talking about value, but we're not talking about the different flavors of value. There's like 3 different kinds of trust as well, which we need to consider. But anyway, I'll leave it there.
Yeah.
Well, let's not leave it there. Let's try and not leave things on questions, because there's lots of answers to these questions that we should be sort of discussing if we want to make something, use something, do something practical. So, for instance, how do we make the algorithms or these AI things visible? Well, I mean, the first thing to do is to be deeply distrustful or understand what AI is. There seems to be a lot of attention on AI at the moment, just recent last 5 years, just because it's doing some sort of commercially interesting things. There's nothing particularly interesting about it. It's just software. And AI is basically just software which we don't understand how it works. It is kind of the invisible hand sort of embodied in software. So how the genetic algorithms or the neural network actually does what it does, we don't really understand. It feels it's a sort of lifelike crafting of the architecture. And in that way, it's just the opposite of what we want to do if we want to try and gain conscious control of the design. So if we want to do things like, I call it common law algorithms. So what you do is you have a common law process. So what you have is panels like this. You debate the particular values, the things you want. You do that in person, you do that in audio visual, then you transcribe that into a set of principles in law, and then you work with the legal people, which in often case that's software developers, to take those values and embody them in algorithms, and you can test the success or failure of those algorithms against the designs that the community has specified. Now you've got a transparent process of the design of that algorithm, and you've also got a way of testing whether that algorithm does or does not do what the community does, right? So it's pretty straightforward. We know what to do, but we've got to like demystify the overall process, and we've got to understand that you can't really do that process if you leave the entire algorithm design to companies behind black boxes. So we need to basically make sure that that process is legal, it's in software, and it's a community-driven process.
So do you mean kind of like a community mind mapping?
No, much more than that. It's if you want to, I mean, mind mapping is okay, but it has no I was going to say like no status. It has no power.
It's a design tool, really.
It's a descriptive tool, a design tool. It describes something.
Context.
You don't. A algorithm which determines whether you get an overdraft or not, or whether you get this job or not, or adds up votes, is something that changes the world. It's directly deals with power. It doesn't just describe the world, you know, here's a nice picture I just drew of the world, guys. Here's my mind map, you know, and inform people. These algorithms kill people, or arrest people, employ people, put up skyscrapers. So these are two different domains in philosophy of language. One domain is the domain of descriptive language, and the other one is the domain of performative language which in the speaking of it does something like giving orders and so forth. And there are even two different logics to do with these languages. And a lot of science and a lot of left-wing hippie talk and a lot of non-threatening communication is just about describing things. It's harmless. Yeah. We can share our descriptions. We're not threatening anyone's status here. I'm not taking someone's money.
Actually, that is harmful, because the people doing that, they are not living their emotions. So actually, they're not participants.
Yeah, they're not.
They go to the description part. So I have a real criticism on that one.
They're not being responsible or to their own power or their own moral responsibility to change the way that power is working in the world. And that is because we naturally enough associate a huge history of abuse with people who are interested in power. But just delegating that and leaving it to the same systems is no answer. So yeah, not mind maps, but having a process where you use techniques like mind maps in order to make decisions, and even legally binding decisions, or decisions that have some force, and there are different ranges of those force. That's the sort of, and that goes on to how you go from the very soft initial creative discussions through a social process to end up with algorithm design.
Can I ask the group a question? Is there any way to extricate a sense of self beyond the actual context that we embody? Like, if it's a mind map, then what we're doing is mapping out all of these thoughts, these systems, these sets of causalities. And is there any way to extricate like an ostensible picture of the self outside of all of that context that could be mapped? You know, isn't the emotion, the values, the actual response to that alone?
It is done. the protective security forces have been doing it for years. It's called an MO. They get like 300, 400 characteristics of you, and they map it out. And they map out your MO, what you're like, what you're likely to do. Facebook took that one level further and said, not only are you likely to do this, but if I show you this ad over here, then you're more likely to do these 50 things. And if I keep doing it, you're more likely to do these 25 things. And they slot you. So, but the question is, what I was getting to, the maps, what we need to do is flip the maps. Right now, I'm manually putting ideas and options in front of me.
Meant?
I think so.
I think no.
Well, you also just said MO. MO is 2 letters. It doesn't mean anything. So
modus operandus. Modus operandus.
It's still 2 letters.
Sense of self.
What is it?
Modus operandus is.
Yeah, that's just magic.
That is. Magic. But that's the idea that the database on us. Every time you're born, there's a database built somewheres, and it starts filling up with information on you. Like it just that's what we want to do under our own control, is what you're saying. But if we flip the map, the idea of the map, I'm manually doing maps. But if we had an intelligence to tell us, based on what you want and what you've said, what does this map look like to you? That's a projection as opposed to history. It's the future. So that's the kind of maps we want to look at, like the AI map with options and, based on, predictable things that's happened in the past, perhaps. Getting you to this is the kicker, and all that I want to say is that as we move forward, we're trying to define, in the end, what is better. And there is a huge conversation. And we're back to values again.
Yeah, back to values.
I'm confused because the question, if we can perceive our sense of self, it was not a question only of mapping, but if we can perceive it, it's a philosophical question before even we go to software.
Yeah. Well, you can look at it your way. Let me look at it my way.
No, that's fine. But
yeah, well, don't.
There are 2 different levels in the reflection here. So, okay. I just wanted to point that out, and that was my question to Phelan. What sense of self did you mean?
No, that's exactly that. That when we look at the context that connects us to the world, all of the systems that we engage daily, and our our proximity to it, our engagement of it, that somehow lends to the description of us that the world sees, whether it be a digital footprint that we give, whether it be the context of the relationships that we have, our education, all of the information that we digested since we were kids, like all of that could be mapped. Now, our values, the way that communities, the way that people develop values is the responses that they have to the context, like whether if it's a negative response, then you build values that would somewhat protect you and your community against this potential negativity. Now, if it's a positive one, then you build values that would promote this particular thing. And the emotions that we all tend to develop are directly related to that. And I'm like, okay, well, is there a possible way to extricate a sense of self that isn't directly related to the context? If the answer is no, then I think that we could develop some kind of agent that would act on our behalf.
Let's not talk about agents really, but I mean, because what is an agent? An agent is a foreign power, usually a colonial power, that trades on your behalf. Yeah, this language of AI and agents. But forgetting that, I want to pick up. I could show you some visual stuff and some software and some very direct ways in which relate. So if anyone wants to take a pause, I can just demo a little thing here. I haven't prepared anything, but. A key way to extract out the individuality and the context and the graphing and the mind mapping and the social stuff is, in terms of actual work that's software and works that's been done now, and I can show you, is the first thing you have to do is to give everyone their own space, so their own identity and their own writing space. So rather than an agent or an algorithm and everything being a network and it gives you your individuality, you have your own simple writing space, and any content that's out there, any graphs, any material, I can just Phelan, if you write something and I like what you write, I can fork it. I can fork your stuff, a little idea, a graph, a mapping of context that you have in your own context. So you relate all this stuff in your world. And I say, oh, that's an interesting thought you just had there about identity. I fork that into my world. And now I've got a different context. Yeah. And some of the links that you made in your context are now sort of going to my context. And that can be as simple as, let's say, if you linked a page to a little page which said context, you wrote your thoughts down about context. I've got a page where I've been writing about the logic of context objects in object-oriented programming or whatever shit it is, right? It's a different context. And when I take your page, it's now linking to mine, but I can also see your page. So I can now pull up your page and you're writing about context in a different way. And I can drag content across. And that way I'm making a graph of my own individual thinking and my own ideas and my own thought, but copying, forking from other people. So there's a dialogue between our individual contexts.
There's an overlapping. Isn't that where the values develop? Where you have shared values with people is where that overlapping actually happens?
That's alignment.
Yes, because when you have the graph stuff that Colin is talking about, the mind mapping stuff, if you have a graph of context of ideas, let's say Phelan, and I have one, the beauty of the mathematics of graphs is when we come together, these ones stick and this one sticks and we form a shape. And if there are 20 of us, you can pick out the most sentient ways that we come together, so you can form a common context. So if we have a language where we're each developing our own context graphs, our own little discussions of ideas, when a group like this comes together, even before we meet, our graphs meet, and we can say, oh, look, that's what this group's about, and the most salient points come out, but you all the time have individual authored context of individual people. So if I want to jump into your world, I just follow the context, the graph of this community here, and then I click on that and I jump into Phelan, your particular graph world. And that way, but the important thing to do is make sure that you have this architecture of the individual and their thinking and their creative control, not invisible hand AI agent shit. That's delegating your control to Google or whoever's controlling the AI, right? Who understands it, who's coded it, who's developed it, right? To something where you can sketch it, you can write it, you can talk with your friends over your self-conscious awareness of what you're doing and craft it, right? And then when we come together, there's a little bit of magic, but again, it needs to be super comprehensible. When our graphs come together, you need to be able to see it and understand it. Again, not this agent-based crap where it's just like, fuck knows how that decision got made, you know? I just like, was that like some programmer who did that? I don't know what happened there. It just magically told me that that's what I want, you know? That is like what your mother used to do to you when you were like 4 years old, you know? We don't really want that form of parenting in our politics. We want people to be responsible and consciously crafting their way through this world rather than just being completely in the control of some artificial software.
But isn't that what the problem is, though? Isn't that what the problem is, though? That what you're describing, all of these overlapping systems, they're inhibiting us from ever really reaching a point. Well, I mean, ostensibly, we have what you're describing, but once you actually dig deeper, you realize that we're actually being guided by all of these other influences that really take that type of agency and autonomy away from us.
Now, what I'm trying to say is that there are very straightforward things that we can show and we can start using that do it a different way, that give us control. If we start using this language of agents and AI and all this stuff that unless you're really into AI and neural networks and how they're architected, and you've got budgets to do it.
What word to use? I just put scripts. Agents or scripts of us.
Scripts of us. It doesn't matter what.
Comprehensible conversations is what I would use. So if you structure our conversations in ways which we can draw them on paper, that we can communicate them, and then we can embody them in systems of code and law that make our collaborative conversations productive, fair, and make decisions on our collective behalf. And if that overall process we're conscious of and in control of its design, then those are the sorts of languages that we can do. And again, I can show you software and the work of people who if we want to embody that in a practical project that we're using, it's not rocket science. You know,
I'd like to find out about what practical things we can do to have a better conversation among us, and to feel like have the conversation feel good to us, to feel like we're here for our purpose.
Yeah. So I agree.
Because I don't want to have more of these conversations, a conversation like last week. I want to get as quickly as possible into more productive conversation. Not like this isn't a productive conversation.
That is also a very interesting
But this group is a practical knowledge ecologist product group. So I'd like to bring it back to the practical now. Yeah.
And I think that's what I'm trying to do with the knowledge trails and just writing it down. What I find the failing feature is producing it in a way that it's attractive to other people to actually have a comprehensive conversation in there. I really like the distinction just made between agents and comprehensive conversation, because it changes the dynamics of how you see yourself. More to what Phelan was saying, as opposed to me making a LinkedIn profile and waiting for people to read it as my agent being that profile. I could say my profile is more like what me and Phelan are doing together. So it's within a context of actually doing something with Phelan is the agent, not me as an agent, him as an agent, and then there's a super agent. The agent actually is the flow between me and Phelan and that magic thing. And the alignment of values is how you make that flow bigger. If the alignment goes smaller, then you need to have these adapter tools, which we were talking about. For example, people who may not be capable of having great coherence could actually have crutches like a broken leg so that it would keep them on topic, for example, not something trying to sell them the newest car, for example.
Exactly.
And that's where I came about the Briggs-Myers type indication system, or Myers-Briggs, I guess it's called. And I know it's a failed system. I know it's built on a couple of ladies who wanted to make people work better after the war and get women into the workforce. I know all these things, but I also really, really like the horoscopic feeling it gives me that I'm different than you, and it's not a dichotomy, but it's a spectrum. And let's look behind that and see what it really is, as opposed to this straw man of, Myers-Briggs.
I would say that the only way to get away from philosophers talking down the pub and conversations going with each other and past each other and swimming around is to build something, to get people to build something together on a week-by-week basis. So it would seem to me that there's some, but I'm quite new to this particular group and conversation. There's some commonality around the representation of conversations as mind maps that are both kind of that anyone can use, that we can lay down on conversations that are sort of artistic and creative, but also can be taken in a more formal, abstract, logical way that goes, so you can get people who are interested in that kind of aspect working, and you can get people who are interested in the visualization of these conversations working. And we need to write stuff. If we don't record, transcribe, and write together these conversations, we won't be building. It'll just go round and round in the classic email gossip chat chain. So I think the practicality comes out of saying, okay, let's take the best that we've got available now to capture this form of conversation together, and let's all commit to putting some work into doing different parts of that and get better and better at it over the cycle.
That's great.
I'm going to say something. So,
yeah, go ahead.
Shush. So I'm just going to introduce another practical thing, just giving an update, and it's related to this conversation, and maybe that can make it more, more practical. So Johnny and I are working on this NYU thing to get basically not really a grant from them, but letting us use their facilities at ITP. So we're writing a summary of our program, and Johnny he had a conversation with a woman named Monica Anderson, and she's supposed to be one of the top 50 AI people who does, I think it's natural language processing. And so we want to have roundtable discussions of kind of visions people have, and then she basically said we could use her software for free to process these discussions. And so I was just wanting to put this to the group. What are some practical things that you think that we can implement to make sure that to basically record these conversations, to process these conversations? There are lots of conversations happening. No one has the time to listen to each one. How do you get out the wisdom from these conversations? Yeah.
Go ahead, David. You're a new guest. I'll let you speak more.
Okay, so been working on exactly that for quite a long time, for many years actually. So I would say there's a couple of layers of it. So one is the physical meeting, the Zoom, the audio, this kind of multimedia. Anyone can rock up and we start talking kind of stuff. So we need to do something with that content. Probably the simplest starting point for a practical technique to capture those conversations is called World Cafe format. Who knows the World Cafe format?
Who doesn't?
Okay.
Yeah.
It's really simple. Who doesn't know open space, unconference? Not many people know these things. So, all right. So these are sort of events where you turn up and there's no agenda, and then people kind of meet up and anyone can speak, and they say, I want to speak about this, and I'm going to go to this room, and you put stuff up on the board, and then you have a process where you cluster those, and then 20 people go to this room and have a discussion, and 20 people go to another room, and the audience, everyone's a speaker and audience, can go from room to room to room. And then after an hour, people come back into the main forum, and there's one person from each room that summarizes the discussion that they had in that room back to everyone. So that's unconference open space meeting, and it gets quite detailed, but it's basically quite simple. World Cafe is you sort of do it in round the table, and there's a moderator on each table, a short provocation of the discussion. Everyone then breaks up, has 15 minutes on the table. The moderator summarizes that. Then people change table, and each table is usually taking the same topic from a different perspective. One might be from the point of view of children, the other from the environment, and so forth. And so you, as an audience, it's quite fun. You go from table to table. You have detailed face-to-face conversations with 5, 6, 8 people. That gets captured and recorded, and then it comes back again. And usually, more recently, people are experimenting with videoing or capturing those summaries. Now, in Zoom, I don't know if people have used Zoom very much. It has a facility called, we're in Zoom now, it has a facility called breakout rooms. Breakout rooms means that you can get up to, on a free account, 500 people in these Zoom conferences. So at the moment, we've got about 8, right? And you then press the button and it randomly puts people into groups of, like, you can set the size, 15 people or 8 people. And so then you have 20 groups of these 8 people. And you all discuss in a small, intense, face-to-face group. And you say to one person in that group, oh, will you summarize the discussion, right? And you meet for about 15, 20 minutes. And then we all come back into this big meeting, and the individuals whose role it is to summarize present back to everyone. They say, well, we talked about this, and, blah, 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 and talked for about 5-6 minutes. And in Zoom, you've got the ability to press record, so you can then record all those summaries. And I've written some software that chops those video summaries up and attaches them to little wiki pages for each of the rooms, so that you can then start visiting them later and writing about them and researching them later. And also you can then have these meetings in different geographic spaces, because you can have these discussions. We've done a number of discussions where it's in both physical and online space. So you have the projector up, there's some people coming online, and you have the camera onto the speakers in the real room. And so you have these discussions, we call them conversations across space. So that's one set of techniques that we can use straight away to organize decentralized conversations in multiple cities, in different time zones, and capture the audio and the video in a meaningful way. You can then run those audios and videos through transcription software from Watson and IBM and various other things to automatically transcribe them. And you can then do text data mining of those texts, of the transcriptions, to form an automatic mind map of the relationship between those topics. And you can, I've been working this week on taking that and linking those to Wikipedia articles. So now you have a web of conversations round the initial, quite impromptu meeting of people in Zoom and in physical space. So people come together on a weekend, have fun, end up with a document.
That's my twin, and those are the knowledge trails, and one format, and yeah, definitely hooked to Wikipedia and other brains. It's very interesting, but I want to make it from the human element, and that's where I'm focusing on, that from the human element.
From the human element.
Yes.
Why are all these conversations there? That's number one. Yeah. We are a random group. I still don't know what brings us together exactly. So this to me is really important before we start building anything or producing anything or consenting to, have being produced even. Because it looks like we're already talking about producing. Well, why would we? And this is also, I think, important on the ethical domain. If you go and map all these conversations, and bring them together and bring topics together as if 2 persons that discuss the same topic automatically have the same values. I don't think so. So
you do it on themes. So you choose, for instance, Amanda, you say, I want to do a conference, a distributed conference on this topic, and you set the agenda, and then you bring 2 people together.
I said synergy does not go by topic for me.
Sorry?
Synergy does not go by topic.
Well, I don't mind what technique you want to use to set the synergy.
Did you hear what I was just having questions? Why are we conversing? Why do we want to be produced?
And I'm just saying it's kind of up to you. You could design it.
I think that I'm stepping out, to be honest, because if these questions are not addressed, then I have no reason to be here.
Let me step in. The thing is we go by what we do. I'm not going to start talking about, high fashion. That's my sister. Okay. If I want to do that, I'll go get her.
If this is not important to you guys.
We make micro agreements when we converge. I didn't know David from a hole in the ground till like 5 minutes ago. I think he's my,
I'm just shocked somebody wants to produce me while I'm still finding out why I'm here. Is that a weird question?
Do you have to know exactly what you're doing all the time, or can you explore?
I did exploration, but before I'm being produced, I want to know why I'm here.
Oh, produced. What way are you being produced?
Amanda.
If we think about making video and then, have a technique and how we build things together, then,
it was very valuable for me. I can say that.
Okay, that is, skipping a few questions to me.
Okay, well, pose your questions.
No, I just did, but I don't.
Okay, well, I'm telling you that this was very valuable to me. It was directly in my flow.
I'm just stepping out.
And I think that,
I'm just feeling like not it.
Yeah, but I'm thinking that we can come together by finding different things together. So if you don't have anything in common with anybody, maybe that is.
I have things in common, but the thing is, it's so technical, and immediately it skips all the ethical and why questions, and then we want to become practical before we even know why we want that. And then,
so Amanda, I can see, Amanda, I can see incompatibility. This is the third time it's coming up, and I'm going to ask you something.
Yes.
So you have a certain way of participating in a group. You need to have certain questions answered.
Yes.
So, and that's your way of doing things, which is totally respectable. What we're doing now, there's absolutely no agenda. I found myself in a Facebook message with 13 more people. Mm-hmm. So I'm finding out more. What matters for me personally is type of people. I'm trying to understand and learn about things that actually come out. So if this format doesn't work for you, you don't need to stop and try to force your format. This is something we're all learning how to converse, basically.
Ooh.
But what you're suggesting is just
Forcing
one
format by asking why am I here?
Can I offer something?
Wait, can I just say something? We've only had 3 meetings with people who don't know each other. And I think it's a short amount of time to be able to figure out how our values all converge. It's, it's not necessary, I don't think. And what I want to do, the purpose of this is just to bring you together, because I think lots of things will develop from this. But I don't think we all need to, we're not a team. We don't need to be a team. And there can just be people who meet and then talk, and then things can form naturally from there. And Amanda, I have to tell you that I think you need some snacks.
Snacks? What is that?
Snacks. You need a snack. Eat some food, Amanda.
I am eating all the time. No, that's not a problem, but I'm just a bit upset. We talk about being produced, about producing, about AI, all this without really going deep. Well, we went deep and then we went out of that again, and then we go back into the technology, and then we forget that people do not need to be produced. Their conversations do not need to be produced. They can just be together. I'm just like, why would we? I do not have the point yet in this group to do that. Actually,
can I offer something? Something? I think that, and I'm hearing it, and my spirit is just telling me that at the heart of why this group needs to be together is exactly what Amanda is saying. I think that what we're trying to do here is just that: establish a contextual map of what our values are, and to extricate from it the values that we believe that represents a foundation for building something that could lend something good to the world. I think that all of this conversation that we're having, should be centered around values, around producing a map of these values, producing not necessarily a metric or a hierarchical order of importance.
I think you're right, and that's where I started with. But I also think everybody is speaking their values here today in a roundabout way. And if they aren't, then why are they here? Right? If you're here not speaking your values, like I'm taking certain things for granted in the room, but how do we align them and produce the best one of us? I'm thinking if I made a place card for each person, put their picture on it, put a link to their Facebook page, and then the things that they're interested around it, that could take part in a lot of these conversations. But beyond that, if we're trying to do values and what's better, hey, Josh, you taking off?
No, that was Sam.
Okay, sorry. Yeah, if we are trying to find out what's better, I do know something. If we follow that too far, we're going to end up at war as we try to define better, because we're going to end up disagreeing, and then we're going to end up having tribalism. So, you know, that's why I want the artistic filters to stop us before we get that far. You know, can we stay at the higher level of values that we can, you know, build a prototype and say, and I think open source software does that. And, you know, Aaron Puttimore has been talking a lot about that with the conflicts we've been having about we need systems and DAOs that allow us to contribute our good without making rules, what other people should do to live their lives. So how can we contribute the positive things we have without bringing the baggage and getting into, and those are people adapters to me. It's a cold term, but it's the attractor to bring people into this room and be friendly enough to say what our values are, what we're looking for. And David, it just happens to be somebody who's very much into context and being able to handle that programmatically. And that's where my mind has been for a long time. So that might have been a bit technical, but I really appreciated it. But if we can't make a map of topics or values or something and follow it, then we are just going to go round and round. And from 3 to 6 months of the GCC, the thing missing to me is some kind of a prototype of what is going on. Number 2, there is no we doing a project. There is, I'm interested in 3 people here and may do a project with 3 people here. But I would like to talk to you all.
Hey, Joshua?
Yeah. Hi, everybody. I'm just saying hello. Nice to see everyone. I gotta run soon, but pleasure to meet you, David. I think what you're talking about is sort of the elephant in the room of the global conversation, which is when the Terminator AI robots take over and start controlling the world, because we all saw this meme a long time ago, and it's in the back of our minds, but it's coming to the forefront of the global zeitgeist and the conversation. We all as humans want to make sure that the algorithms that are programmed are conscientious of us humans, and we're screaming into the void, if you will, meaning we're recording these Zoom conversations to make sure that the algorithms that do get programmed take into account what we feel and who we are as humans and what our consensus is and who we are. And I know it seems like, that'll happen one day, we don't know. No, it's very real.
Yeah.
What's that, Colin?
No, I said you're right. It's happening now.
It's happening now. We can do that.
It's absolutely happening now. And someone, if this is uploaded to YouTube, it's put somewhere in a space, but we don't know for sure 100% that these conversations will be taken into account when the artificial intelligence singularity is created. And I think as a global zeitgeist, we all want to make sure that it's programmed correctly so it works for us, so we can raise our kids in this world and have a great world. And I think that conversation is a very big and serious conversation. I think when we're all just having opinions about it, that's awesome. But let's make sure whatever we end up doing, whether it be a group, a team, or individuals, that we clearly state how we want these algorithms to be programmed so that the machine learning and the AI can program them correctly and take into account how humans actually interact and feel. And so with that being said, it's really important how we communicate and have a conversation so that the robot AI can make sure that this is what humans want. So if we're speaking from a place that's talking directly as conscious programmers for the future algorithms that will be created, I just want to put that into people's minds that that is what will help to program the system. And if you think that that's fantasy or non-reality, I'd love to talk about that another time, but working with Google and working with AI, this is very real.
Not fantasy. Not fantasy. It's just very pragmatic. I would just say that I think we've got a moral responsibility to take what you're saying and not just as, oh, we just need to record this and put it on YouTube, like describe it tell people what we feel and think. What we can do is we can, if we take these conversations and structure it according to values, so we can talk about what those values are, but for instance, like bottom-up decision-making, democratic values, respect for things that we care about, whether it be elders, the environment, wisdom, honesty, whatever these values are, right? And we can embed them in a legally valid constitutional framework. What that means is that these discussions can have force. It means if a government or a council or a company or a group of software developers come and say, hey, you guys who've all talked on YouTube, what do you want to do? That we can show them that the decision of these 100,000 people who've met and had these conversations is to put these values in and not these values, or that there are different sorts of subdivisions within them. They can cater for one or another. It's a subgroup, you know. There can be the Trump supporters who have their values that the algorithms are done on, and there can be the progressive with their values that have algorithms on them. But it's important that these conversations that we have, that's why I said not just mind maps and not just uploading onto YouTube, also have sufficient structure to be of legally binding force. And we can do that with using things like cooperative structures, co-ops and so forth, and DAOs that I think Colin mentioned as well.
Hey everyone, we just have 4 minutes left, and I actually just wanted to direct the conversation to Lena, who hasn't said anything. And so Lena needs some help, or she said to me that she would like some help with her website. It's kind of online resume. So I just wanted to say that that's an ask that she has. And again, I do want to bring this down to a practical group of people just making connections and kind of helping each other in the projects that we're doing. And when people have something that they're working on, that we just kind of help them out.
Thank you, Lauren. And I just want to say, middle of speaking, and then David cut me off, which was awesome, and I loved it. But I would also like to help Lena as well, and I want to get to that. But I just wanted to finish the last little bit of what I wanted to say, and I'll make sure it's 30 seconds or less. Is that okay? Okay, so I just wanted to say, David, I love what you're doing. I sent you a Facebook message. Please contact me. Let's talk later. Lena, I want to help you with what you're doing. And right before I do, I just want to say the first company I started in 1994 was a marketing company for telemarketing. We turned it into a texting company. We were doing texting in the late 90s. And my business partner just sold the company 2 years ago to Dragon Naturally Speaking, which is called Nuance. And he got $350 million for all of these texting conversations to be sold to an artificial intelligence company called Nuance in Massachusetts. So This is very real. And with that, I'm complete, and let's help Liana.
Wow.
No, like, thank you for letting me check in. And I was enjoying the fact that I can be only an observer, because I noticed that a lot of contacts and content has been created since this group met for the first time in the last 2 weeks. I was not able to follow up, therefore I was not really feeling invited to speak here. I was just like, let's see what they're doing now, let's see what's going on. And then I noticed very interesting conversation here, so I didn't want to interrupt. I just would like to say that I'm very happy now that David joined us. It's not like I'm now getting gold groupie all over again. I said to myself, next time when you notice a very smart guy, just don't do that. No, so I'm not going to do that. However, I have noticed seniority in this approach. So I noticed a lot of expertise that already has a track record. So what I would say in reference to what was Amanda's question, what are we doing, why we're here, should I step in, should I step out, I would say that this knowledge is very expensive. Let me use a marketing terminology. So for me, even I will not be able to follow up on what's going on, what are you designing, because now I have, as a digital rights activist, I have painfully aware of my limitations on how I even progress with my advocacy work. You know, just some discussions I don't understand and I don't have biological time to figure them out. So therefore, whatever I can follow up, if there is a structure that says, okay, now we have marketing plan, woohoo, like I will learn something. We have a structure, we have an idea how to set up the project team. So whatever it's produced, I would be more than happy to follow the steps just to get into the project process mindset of, let's say, Lauren has very vague idea why should we be here in the first place, but let's say it's an interesting curve to support her quest on what should we doing together. So she has a lot of courage to constantly repeat this question, and she's going somewhere. Now we're talking about hackathon, and 6 months might not be the most important thing to do, might be the loss of time. Doesn't matter, because she's following her quest and she will be learning, and other people will be getting in and out with their expertise and knowledge and with their quest for progressing. Now, my website, now that was the Lauren idea. I wasn't feeling so confident with saying to a bunch of people who can be making money on the market, oh guys, listen, this is what they made with my sites, and I'm, I just need help. I might need some inputs, I might not, because I'm still with like sorting out my CV. Let's say I am trying to not only aligning myself with the market, but with connections that are offering themselves out there. So what I am getting more and more painfully aware that even my heart is beating big time for digital rights. Not only that I'm not a geek, it's the internet and technology belongs to all of us. So I'm not just going to withdraw my agency and say, okay, those guys know it better. Yes, they do. But okay, even us, we need to have a voice. However, on a political scale, and this is very important because like this week, Web had the 30 years, had the 30th birthday, and the next week we had a major fight for a copyright reform. We are really fighting for a basic of internet not to be censored big time in Europe. It's like a net neutrality battle. So I was like, because I was...
What was you said two things. What was the first thing?
The first thing was that Net had 30th birthday last week. So
okay,
by design of the page was like, happy birthday, like...
And copyright reform.
And next thing, it's a copyright reform. So this is the file that I'm following for 2 years now. I was engaged for it voluntarily, full-time work for last year. And and last week I actually realized that I want to say not because I'm not German, or it's like I'm not white enough or not man enough or not geek enough, like I don't like this talk. But the thing is that certain countries do have more weight in a way how politics is made in Europe. And I noticed that, and its infrastructure is quite clear. So I decided, because I'm good in law, I'm good in policy, I decided that would be my cause. However, if Germany is one of the major stakeholders that really have a particular voice in the Council of Europe, why did I assume that German digital rights activists wouldn't be more, let's say, appreciated in the community? So when you see, you have like so much grants, and you see, okay, everybody's German on the list of grants who will go to Brussels, and I was like thinking, shit, they all paid in their NGOs, and I only need a ticket to Brussels. So sometimes what we think that is important, and what is the underlying value, they're different things. I understand people who are making decisions on the grants, because it's more effective to have German activists, French activists. It's either like a big European country, preferably German, or it is about like any big language group. And certain countries here, they do count. I'm from Croatia. We have 4.5 million people. Fine. We are the only language in the European Union out of 500 people. So I was like thinking, okay, where am I going? The things that I thought that they are kind of straightforward, and that it's okay to work for free for so much, you think, oh wow, you're not effective, and in addition, you're not making money, and you're not making connections. So I made my web, I don't know what I'm doing with the profile. I'm kind of aligning myself with the Irish labor market, because now I feel that I will be kind of connected in a different way when actually somebody has a role, because that's an invite. Let's say, okay, we want you because of that. However bullshit specification is, including invoice processing, schedule management, whatever, you know, it's a role, it's an entry point. We want you for that. So this is where I'm coming, you know, I'm trying to blend what I like to do, learning and development, democratical processes, governance is the word, Lena. And I'm trying to kind of mishmash it, what I like to do and what I should be doing, with the message, yeah, I would still like to do something for the web. So I'm kind of vague enough, like Lauren, to say, well, so I would just, but I'm aware of my vagueness. So I would just say, if you have any inputs, I don't ask anybody to design my page. I think that would be rude. But just like, you know, any inputs, any ideas, because Lauren just told me, oh, it's too much text, you should break it with images. I didn't know how to do that, but I found somebody to pay how to do that for me, you know. And campaign was speaking to my heart. Now Lauren is telling me, no, you don't have formal role in this campaign. And it's like, you know, yeah,
wrap it up.
Sorry, dear, you to give me a word finally, and that was my check in and check out.
And you're checking, being suspiciously quiet.
Lena,
I was just up to the point, you know.
Lena, I have a suggestion for you. Clearly, we've only just met and what have you, but with all the background you're talking and the constant energy and when it's turned on, stream and flow, all we need to do is hook up a voice transcription software to wherever you live, and it processes in real time out technical legal documents that we then sell on the market, right? We just need this kind of machine that goes from just you talking out to policy straight away, changes and what have you.
You speak of the flow. I like that.
Speak of the flow. But
yeah, I apologize. I've got one guy to say goodbye.
See you, Joshua.
And Leah, I just put up your page score. It's a little bit low. It's 11 megabytes on your website. You have to optimize your images. Otherwise, it's a beautiful website. And feel free to reach out to me, Lauren, if you can give her my contact on Facebook.
I would second reaching out to Josh. He's been in this field for a long time. Yeah. And Josh is a great fellow too. Like he'll give you the right support and yeah. I would say if you're trying to look to optimize website and get that information, I would say Josh, if he's willing to help you, that would be good. At least give him a first try. I also would like to offer to help pull together everybody's what I call tile. It's almost like trading trading cards. If you remember, like sports cards, you used to get them with bubble gum and you would trade them with your friends. I'm kind of trying to build that digital thing with my map. So that other people, so I can grab it. If I go into a new group, I can just grab your tile and pull it into a new group, and you can just say, you know, look at my map, and eventually there'd be a little PDF of it. The practical part of this, Lauren, is that I'm answering to your question, what's the bridge between our great dreams that we'd like to get to and what can we do right now? And I'm trying to use crayons and duct tape and glue to build prototypes of things.
Yay.
And basically what I'm trying to do is in the creative space where it's not been already finished or done. And I'm looking to reword things to better language and retool my ideas and models to better ideas and better models. And so David has done that today. I think we all get that serendipitously if we can get into that flow of what we want to know and what we're doing. So when that flow is too varied and too diverse, maybe we have to have micro groups. And I think that's sociology or sociology 3.0 or whatever they call it. Too many letters.
Absolutely. I'm in favor of that.
Yeah. So, you know, I think we have to go through the pain of getting our general values out, which I think we're all pretty much in line in trying to, you know, stop global warming and get the truth out there and stop interference by corruption and get it more into knowledge banks that we own so that we can be our own lawyers and say, this is where we were. You can check my knowledge bank. All of the stuff's there. You walk into the courtroom, bingo, bango. It's taken care of. Instead of having to wait for some crooked cop to get out of bed to come, you know, whatever. And it's just, I don't trust people to represent me. Yeah. So how do I represent myself is the big question here. And so I'm trying to represent people in the room, in the group, trying to also look at ways that I can automate this stuff through APIs. And it sounds like David is like way down the road doing the same kind of thing I'm doing. And maybe he's been able to focus on it more. But when I looked at David's tile or trading card, it didn't have what he said today on there. It had something, just give me a second, Control F, David. David Bovell, conversation tools added today. His archetype's a gesture. My background is in medicine, specialized in immunology and evolutionary genetics. So that's where the peer review stuff came out. Not been practicing for a while now, mostly software and theater installation. So my job is to work on the governance aspects. That's what I grabbed out of the thread.
I've been digitized.
Yeah, how do you feel? And
it's all rubbish. I'm a human being.
Yeah.
Putting me into a mind map.
Yeah. Well, it certainly is. And the idea is that you get the feedback loop, so it becomes your representation, not mine.
Yeah, I did this art event in the 90s where it was in a club, and a friend of mine called Olutawa did this like dance performance. And as people came in, I just asked and paid their £1 entry fee or whatever it was and got a ticket. I asked for their date of birth, and I wrote software which mapped their date of birth to star signs and pulled out the star sign text for them and generated this star, like three-dimensional. It's just made of like neon lines. It was very primitive 3D stuff, like VRML it was called, right? And they would float around the space. And so you could see your star projected on the walls of the club, right? And people tended to follow it because it would drift off one screen and onto another screen. And because they used this graph way that they can stick to each other, if your star sign kind of romantically or spiritually like was attracted to another star sign, they would collect together. So then the people in the club they'd kind of collect round about that where that wall was and would start talking, and they'd have a bit of a joke and say, "Oh, that's my one. It likes your one." And
isn't that how they found the Christ child?
Probably, yeah. So that was the Dalai Lama or something like that. But yeah. No, I do like the whole star sign thing. So that's where the sort of theatre stuff comes out. Karmic physics, I called it.
So I just wanted to ask you all something. So one affordance of Zoom is that during our conversations, we can actually type in things to the message board. And then afterwards, when I'm doing the transcription, it downloads for me, it downloads the messages that are sent during the chat and the time stamp that those are sent. So Colin and I were wondering if there's some way that we can use that in our discussions to facilitate our own discussions. Could we use that to indicate something, like a place where we thought the discussion was really great, where we thought it was starting to diverge or go out of the flow, or something we wanted to follow up on, or like something. Anyway, you can mark it and we can see that afterwards. So if you can think of a good use for that, I'd like to know, just in improving, and if there's a way to improve our notes, I want to hear about it, so that I want each discussion to become smarter.
Yeah, so I specifically can, in terms of the writing, collecting that text, putting it into a writing space where we all have our space, and that we can do some of this also mind mapping, and also we can embed the video in. We can meet afterwards, or if anyone wants to get involved in the technical stuff, I could set that up today, and we could start logging the conversations and then start working together. So and designing it, co-designing how it works. So
yeah, that sounds great. I've already got a few of those things done already. And again, I truly am using an infinite canvas, doing it manually, sort of with crayons. And the beauty is you can put any piece of media you want on there. The second piece of beauty is you can print it out as a PDF and other people can have that infinite canvas live with links. There's a few cravats, but we can talk about that later. But yeah, I think that would be beautiful to work from both ends because...
What's the difference? Sorry.
It's the similarity is what it is, not the difference. Like I'm saying with the mind maps I'm using, we should look at that, bringing these conversations that we're having. I'm already doing it. So I think...
Why don't we have a sub, because I don't know, like for instance, there might be people that want to look at, because I offered to show stuff and get all technical about it, but I guess Colin, you'd really want to, and anyone who wants to look at, let's say, oh, we could use this tool, we could do it this way in a sort of slightly nerdy, practical way. I'm up for doing that straight after this or whenever you want. So just tell me.
Yeah,
well,
Colin and I are definitely.
Yeah, this is PKE, right? This is practical knowledge ecology. So I think that's the first subgroup. This is the first subgroup, I would say.
I think with the extra caveat that whatever is discussed, the meat of it, as you were saying, David, that it's able to be encapsulated and brought to the group as an offering.
Yeah, breakouts basically.
Yeah, and it's always horrible that it's like you always have these open groups, and then the conversations get frustrating because they all tend to be like too big and too general, and so people then want to have these nerdy subgroups, and then the bigger group gets like paranoid, quite rightly, that all the real decisions are being made by these stitching up little subgroups, and so this is the governance architecture, and then we've got to get that right. And Phelan, you've got to look at your chat. I've just sent you my whole DNA and personal profile, and I'm worried that you won't respond.
Does anyone want to meet? So I want to go to Sam's meeting, because Sam has a meeting that's scheduled that every week that I want to go to, because I've missed a few times. But after 1 o'clock I can meet, and I would love to meet about that, David and Colin, if you or anyone else who's actually.
I'm doing things today, but maybe later tonight. I don't know. You're in London, right? So that doesn't really work so well. Maybe tomorrow morning for me.
Yeah, pretty well. Any time works for me. If
tomorrow
it's
morning, Lauren?
5 in the morning, it's not good for me. But if it's 4 or 3 in the morning, it's fine. If it's
no, our mornings are afternoon, so
yeah. So just tell me what time is that? My time? Are you suggesting?
I think right now I'm 4 hours from you, and Lauren's 5.
Yeah. So.
And that'll change to 5, 6 later.
So you're talking about 8 o'clock tonight or something?
Okay, 8 o'clock tonight would be 2 o'clock your time. No, wait, midnight.
Midnight or 1, something like that. That's fine for me.
Or 8 o'clock tomorrow would be noon your time.
They're both absolutely fine. I just don't know how to sleep. It's fine.
Okay.
How about
well,
tonight? Tomorrow tonight at 8.
Tonight at 8? Okay, sounds good.
So I have to go, and I'm not sure if this whole thing is going to crash once I leave. I'm not quite sure how the settings are.
No, I think you have to transfer the